Hey Hunters, Halo Zoo here for a special video. That's actually not what I wanted to start on. So this is a special video talking about the one D&D Bastion system again. This is an addendum to my previous video, just pointing out some stuff that I've seen discussed in various comments as we've gone on from the time it was initially shown off. There are only two things to talk about here. One is the point math on the Bastion points, and another is integrating it into the gold economy. The latter of which I'm going to start with as basically no. Just no. Please, Wizards, if you're listening to this, do not listen to those people asking for, hey, this should cost gold and stuff. Because heck, Wizards has already said they don't want it to be like you have to like mortgage payments and all that stuff, where it's a very complex system for what's supposed to be an optional system that adds on to the game. Like, I don't want it to cost gold to actually build the Bastion in the first place. I know it's more realistic and it's like, oh yeah, I want to have that stuff, but for the base system, this is fine. Like, leave it like this. Have this be kind of the basic system where, uh, it does everything. Like, it's fine as it is. Because integrating it further into the gold economy would basically just ruin the system, in my opinion, as it's like, and suddenly you're having to pay a bunch of gold to set it up, and that takes away from your budget of adventuring gear just to get this going. You have to pay to get every facility, so that's more management costs, and then you got to pay all your hirelings and all that stuff. Where this system, as it is right here, in its place with the economy, it's fine. It's, if anything, perfect as a system that, yeah, it's a bit gamey to have this other resource that you use for it, but I prefer it mostly because it means that at its base, you don't have to micromanage it in order to get the most out of it. And it's not aggressively complex. This, it's simple to understand. And that's the beauty of it, where it's like, hey, if you want to mess with this, you don't have to mess with it at all. It's designed to be simple. And sure, there's a lot of potential to min max and micromanage it to be perfect, but I think as a basic system, this is perfectly fine. Like, it's great even as a simple thing you can have for fun. Like, and that's the best part is you don't even have to really use the build or the bastion points a bunch to get a lot out of this, where it's like, yeah, it's a base of operations you can use and have fun with. Uh, Now, there are some issues with it in this form, like, but I think ultimately, despite the gaminess, I do prefer this approach where it's intentionally simpler than it some people might want, but I think there's also room to have an alternative rule set where you do have all that, but make it completely optional as if you want to micromanage a business, go ahead. There's this alternative rule set to allow that. But this version is here. It's assumed to be the default, as more than likely you're going to have players who don't want to micromanage it and have to like have a migraine trying to micromanage everything and the economy to get it going in the first place, much less going smoothly. I think it's just, as it is right here, it's more of an additive system than a system that requires you to do a lot of management stuff in order to even keep it going. Uh, and require a lot of micromanagement and min maxing to actually make it work smoothly, which I think, for what it is, no, that no, it doesn't work with that idea. But then we have the bastion point costs. And oh boy, are these something. So I decided to do the math. As preliminary gut feeling is that this is a bit overtuned in the costs here for what you're actually getting. So here's the math. This is a bit complicated for some, but okay. So the basics of how I got to these values, I use the middle value of the dice. So for a D4, that's a 2.5. A D6 has 3.5. D8 has 4.5, and D10 has 5.5. So that's how we get. So that's our average number. For minimum and maximum, of course, it's different, but I also assumed the low ball of 6 bastion turns per level. So if you're doing 7 or 8, it will change. But I decided to go with 6 because that's the minimum suggested. I could try with 8, but I mean, this already took a long time to get the math. As for the specific facilities, it shouldn't actually matter, but for reference, I used a garden and sanctuary at 5th, greenhouse and sacristy at 9th, reliquary at 13th, and a sanctum at 17th, as I didn't double check, but it seems like all the 5th level facilities have a D4, 9th level facilities have a D6, 13th level have D8s, and 17th level have D10s for the bastion points you get. This does mean that the maintain versus orders in the first level bracket are always the same, but at later levels it starts to change up. So I'm not going to talk about this column this time. And for reference, I have actually done a previous version of this video, but I decided to scrap it because I had this and the cantrip stuff. This is just going to be about bastions. So for the maintain only, on average, in the first level bracket, I ended up at 120 bastion points, and that's 30 per level. So each time you'd gain a level, you'd have 30 bastion points, so you could buy a common item if you wanted. At the second level bracket, you'd get 240 bastion points total, and then that would get you 60 per level. So every level you'd have 60 points to spend. In the third level bracket, you'd have 300 bastion points, and that's at 75 per level. And by the way, the numbers in the brackets are just the number of levels you spend in that bracket. At least what I had you spending in that bracket. And then in the fourth level bracket, which you only spend 3 levels at, since I didn't go all the way to 21, you get 270 bastion points, and that's 90 per level. And these all total up for 930 bastion points. So doesn't seem to be that much. You only get 1 legendary item, 3 uncommon, and 1 common maximum. So that's the most you can get. And for reference, this is combining all the bastion points you could get over the course of the game. This is where you end up. So you pretty much have to save most of the game just to get the legendary. And it's ridiculous how long you have to wait for it. it's one of my big complaints of it is that the values seem very overtuned for what they are, where you're really not going to get many points at all to get to a legendary. And you have to save up between levels, which it's a system that pretty much punishes you for trying to actually use the system. It's like, it's not a fun thing. Like, I want to use the system, but then I'm punished for it because I can't get the good stuff from it. It's like, okay, I'd rather I didn't have to rely on waiting so long. But I can kind of get... I mean, I guess they don't want you getting many legendaries, which... fair, but as we'll see, it can get kind of crazy with the randomness. So if you only did orders, so this is assuming... and that was if you basically ignored ordering your Bastion to do anything, and it was just maintain all the time. If you did orders all the time, then the average first level bracket, of course, it's still 120 Bastion points with 30 per level. Second level bracket, however, it goes up to 288 Bastion points total, and that's at 72 Bastion points per level. Third level bracket, we're at 396 Bastion points at 99 per level. And then, in the fourth level bracket, we also end up with another 396, but this time at 132 per level over the course of 3 levels. And this totals us at 1200 Bastion points, which gets us 1 legendary item, 1 very rare item, 2 uncommon items, and 10 Bastion points left over. So, you certainly get a lot more. But this assumes you are always able to give orders whenever you get a Bastion turn. So, basically, you'd have to stay close to the Bastion in order to utilize it. This does mean you can use the Influence once, assuming you get this exact amount. But, yeah. And the average between these two... and this is just the average of these two, because it was like originally going to be the average. Then I added the other 3, but so if you do a mix of maintain and ordering, on average, it would be based on my simple math of just add these two together. Of course, first level bracket, 120 Bastion points, 30 per level, unchanged. Then in the second level bracket, it would be about 264 at about 66 per level. Then in the third level bracket, you'd be around 348 Bastion points at around 87 per level. And then you'd have in the fourth level bracket around 333 Bastion points at around 111 per level. And of course, you'd get 1065 Bastion points total from this, which would result in 1 legendary, 1 rare, 1 uncommon, and 2 commons. So it usually seems like you can usually get away with an uncommon, with 1 exception. Well, actually 2 exceptions. You can kind of get screwed getting you're usually safe to get an uncommon, but in the end, that can screw you out of some items. Potentially. But then the exact minimum. So, of course, this isn't divided as no matter what. Each dice has a minimum of 1 on the roll, so there's no differentiation here. But the minimum for Bastion, for the first level bracket would be 48 Bastion points at 12 per level. So that's your floor. Then in the second level bracket, we have 24 per level, for 96 total at this bracket. And then in the third level bracket, it would be 120 Bastion points at around 30 per level. And then in the third level bracket, you'd have at least 108 with at least 36 per level, with the very minimum you could get. Like, if you have the worst Sill luck possible, and by Sill luck I mean very bad at dice rolls, you'd have 372 Bastion points, which means you can get one very rare item, one common item, and 2 Bastion points left over. This hurts. That if you save all your Bastion points up, you can get one very rare item and one common item. And I don't even think you can actually get the last item unless you're, like, literally until you get to 20th. So yeah, it's, ooh boy, is it it's pricey. It really is. So ultimately you're going to run into a lot of problems where if you're rolling really low, you can basically kiss getting a legendary goodbye. As I think even rolling a 2 per dice is still not going to get you much more. As, well, no, if you rolled all 2s, you'd actually still get to 700. So you could still get to a legendary, but yeah, it's pretty harsh. And then the maximum, if you just maintain, in the first level bracket, you'd have 192 Bastion points at 48 per level. Then at the second level bracket, you'd have up to 384 Bastion points at up to 96 per level. Then in the third level bracket, it would be 480 Bastion points maximum at most 120 per level. Then in the third level bracket, you'd have 432 Bastion points at 144 per level. And then you'd have, just by maintaining all the time, 1488 Bastion points. And this is assuming you stick with the 6 Bastion levels per turn. Or Bastion turns per level. And then you can get 2 legendaries, an uncommon, and have 18 Bastion points left over. Literally 2 away from a common item. But it does mean you can use influence once, but that's like the worst thing you can do with Bastion points. Let's be honest. Then the maximum you could get from being there all the time and getting to order every Bastion turn at 6 turns per level. Of course, the minimum, or the first level bracket, is 192 Bastion points at 48 per level still. Then, in the second level bracket, it would be 480 Bastion points at 120 per level. Which is ironically how much you'd get at the next bracket. I just realized. Huh. And then in the third level bracket, it would be up to 672 Bastion points at 168 per level. And then the maximum for the third level bracket would be 684 Bastion points. The only time the fourth level bracket beats the third level bracket. Though it did meet on orders only average. But here it beats it 684 with 228 per level. And that leaves you with 2,028 Bastion points, which can get you 2 legendaries, 1 very rare, 1 rare, 1 common, and 8 Bastion points left over. So yeah. This does make me kind of see that there's a lot of variance. Like, I mean, there's actually at least a decent chance you can get a very rare item, but oh boy, is it kind of crazy with how many you can get. And it feels like if a player is rolling high, they can get 2 legendaries, assuming they actually save up their points, which is really annoying that you have to save up to get to the legendary, where that's one thing I think can be improved with lowering the costs a bit, where it would feel more fair and it would let players kind of get, sure, you could get more magic items, but more specifically, it would be a way of guaranteeing you get the good stuff without requiring a lot of min-maxy and looking ahead, where it's more likely, oh, if you roll good, you can still get to a legendary item in the 3rd level bracket. Like, rather than have to basically build up to getting it and then looking at everything else you can get, instead it would be something you can actually feasibly attain without saving up from the beginning to get to it. And instead be, hey, you can do this, and specifically, you're more likely to be able to get to it by 17th level. Just like you're more likely to get to the rare by 9th, the very rare by 13th, from 9th to 13th, and the legendary from 13th to 17th. As I think that would be a lot better if you actually were feasibly able to get to the good items in the level bracket you have to get to them. With everything else kind of being, if you roll good, then it's good. Another thing is also that I wish that the special facilities perhaps were, instead of being sequentially they get better, instead have it be, you get a certain number of bastion points just from having, it's like, the set doesn't, the amount you get doesn't scale with the facility. Instead, it's a set amount of, oh, hey, like, maybe they all give D6 bastion points. Or perhaps the amount of bastion points you get from doing orders actually increases as you progress. So it stays that D4, D6, D8, D10 for 5th, 9th, 13th, and 17th level facilities, but instead apply it to all facilities. So at 5th through 9th level, it's always a D4, but then at 9th through 13th, you're rolling a D6 for every facility. Then it's a D8 for every facility, then a D10 for every facility. As I think that would be a bit better and encourage making the bastion you want, rather than, oh, I've always got to get the Demiplane Guildhall Sanctum or War Room because I got nothing else to pick, and I got to get that D10. And then also, it's worth noting that another thing I had noticed is there's no special rooms or facilities for fighting style / unarmored defense at 13th, as well as expertise and a skill at 13th. And there's nothing special to arcane foci. You can get the observatory, but you can also get that as a cleric or druid, because it's any spellcasting focus. So those are two things that I would like modified. And of course, there's other modifications like adding stuff specific to druidic foci rather than just all of them are holy symbol or druidic focus. And kind of build some variety with what you can get. I like the idea that it's not class specific, but requires having the ability to use a certain item. Or having a certain type of feature that lets you really customize what your bastion looks like. But I think there's some modification here that would be nice. And you know, pretty happy with this. So overall, that's my thoughts on the Bastions. After some thought and discussions in various comments, thank you if you're one of the people who commented and on my previous videos and basically helped make this video. And of course, feel free to comment on this video as well. But without further, and also of course, I don't like being the sellout YouTuber like this, but like and subscribe for more stuff. And without further ado, I'll see y'all next time. Halo Zoo out.